Hello, my name is Julie, and it's time for the mid-year book freakout tag. If lighting and sound do not work out on this video, you cannot blame me. My smoke detector has been chirping since 1 in the morning, and maintenance came and replaced the battery. Nothing happened, so I'm just gonna have to try to sleep again with this sound going on in my house. I might have to cut myself off in the middle of sentences more than I already do, and the light might die, and it's whatever. This is one of the best booktube videos. It's always one of my favorites, and it's one of the last vestiges of old booktube that stuck around. I miss book tags. I wish we could bring them back. I want them to be popular again because they were just a really fun time. But over the years, I have taken this tag and I have just added more and more to it, just depending on what I want to do. So I'm just gonna run through this list of questions that I have here about how my reading has gone for the last 6 months. As we are almost exactly at the halfway point of the year, I only have 2 more June reads left. Let's just get right into it. So the very first question here is, how is your reading going so far this year? For me, the way that I am, this is always such a hard question to answer. Right now, I've read 70 books and read over 25,000 pages. I'll have read a little bit more by the time June is up. I've returned to giving out 5 stars at a normal pace when last year I barely gave out any. I have done all of my buzzword challenges for the month. These have been the books that I read for the buzzword challenge. These are the books that I've read for the buzz cover challenge. And these are the books for my monthly bingo letter challenge for the year. And I've already read 13 of my 20 must reads of 2026. There are 2 of these that I'm thinking about changing. It was more that they were fulfilling a prompt. I had great expectations. I might be reading Count of Monte Cristo instead. And then I also had Sleeping Beauties. I might be reading Lisey's story instead. Still fulfilling the same briefs. I also DNF'd my first book in 3 years. That's a fantastic milestone for me to have accomplished. I've also read 14 out of the 26 series that I was in the middle of at the beginning of the year and am behind on. I had a goal of clearing out a good amount of the older books or books that I got cheap or used or just books I wasn't super excited about on my TBR based on lots of challenges I've been forcing myself through this year, and I think I've made noticeable progress. I decreased the number of books that I had since before 2023 by 31%, which is pretty good, and the cheap or free books that I got, all those books that I wasn't really excited about, I've decreased that pile by 40% since the beginning of the year, which is actually way more than the books that I've been excited about. But I think that's where the other half of it comes from. I have been focusing on reading or getting rid of, but I've been giving so much of my attention to these books on my shelf that I'm not quite as excited about. So hopefully in this latter half of the year, I will be able to focus more on the stuff I'm really super excited about. The next question is, what is the best book that you have read this year? Usually with this question, I have multiple answers, and I've worked really hard to only give like one answer for each of these questions, but truly, I have a #1 book of the year so far, and I feel like it's gonna be hard to topple, and that is No Matter What by Cara Bastone. Cara Bastone has now solidified herself as one of my favorite authors of all time because she has gone 3 for 3 with 5 stars, which is incredible for any author to do in only 3 books, and even more incredible in a genre that I don't tend to love a lot. But Cara Bastone really understands what I want out of a romance. No Matter What is a romance that is between a married couple that has been on the rocks since they were in a traumatic car accident a year ago. And when our main character Roz sees paperwork for her husband to move out and go to another apartment, she realizes her life is falling apart. And one of the things that ends up helping her is she starts going to a figure drawing class. And that is part of what ends up bringing these 2 back to each other. I love Cara Bastone's characters. I think their journeys are so good. And I love that her stories feel so much more like real life than a lot of romance-focused books that I read, because it is talking about difficult things that the person might be going in their personal life and how that affects the relationship. This book is her most emotional of them, in my opinion. I full sobbed. I have not full sobbed at a book in about a year before I read this, and I just could not get enough of it. I really cannot recommend her books enough. She did announce her 2027 release, and I'm so excited. Next up, we have the best first book in a series. Last year, I had so many good things to tell you about, but this year, I have not had any first book in a series exceed a 4.0 flat rating. And I think the best of those was the Second Death of Locke by V.L. Bovalino. This is an epic fantasy romance that is the first in a companion series. It is about our main character, Gray, who lives in a world where people, they're either mages or wells. You are either a person who uses magic or a person who is a source of magic, and they pair those people up. She is in love with her mage, who has been her childhood best friend for a long time. The first act of this book is perfect. It is 5 stars, and the rest of the book, I don't think really lived up to that. You could really feel a clunky difference in between the different acts of this book, but I thought just that the like longing and love between these two characters, while also being in like a dark fantasy setting that felt like a battlefield should, and it was just like really good descriptive language that gave such a strong tone that I am absolutely looking forward to more from this series, because I would like to see this author grow into giving maybe a more fully fleshed out thing. I think that we could see some really great stuff from this author. Next question, best sequels or conclusions. I've had a couple of like 4.25 sequels, but I have had 2 conclusions that ended up being 4.5 stars in series that had highs and lows for me. So I'm going to talk about The Tempest Blade by Danielle L. Jensen. This is the final in a fantasy romance series that I absolutely love. This is The Bridge Kingdom. It is a 6-book series where every 2 books follows a different couple, and it's all one political plot. So it's not one you can jump around in. The very beginning of the series, our main character is Laura. Her and her sisters, who are princesses from the king's harem, have been locked away and trained to be the best assassins ever. And one of them is going to be married off to this king of a rival nation who has been basically starving out their country. And she decides to sacrifice what she sees as her own freedom by offering herself up as the person to go by faking all of her sister's deaths without anyone knowing that that's what's going on, so they can go live their lives, because she thinks that her family would have killed them. And she goes off and marries this king, and she finds out there may be things she doesn't actually know about the political situation based on propaganda. And this last book, I do think, after a couple of books that stumbled but are still worth reading, this book really returned me to what I think Danielle L. Jensen does so well in the first several books. And it sold me on this relationship that I did not care about previously. So I think she just did a really great job wrapping this up when I did not trust her to. Shout out to Danielle. Love that. Next question. What is the best 2026 release you've read so far? It's No Matter What, and it's not close. I'm not even going to talk about the other 2026 releases I've read so far this year, because none of them have lived up quite to my expectations. And we'll talk about another one of those in a second. Next question. What are the best audiobooks that you've read so far this year? I've got a couple more that are on this list, including No Matter What. I'm going to talk about it a million times. But one that I have not brought up elsewhere is The Lilac People by Milo Todd. This is a World War II historical fiction. It is about trans folks and queer folks who had started to come out and be accepted in the Weimar Republic in between World War I and World War II. And then as the Nazis rise to power, how their rights are stripped away. We really see before and after World War II. And in the after timeline, the Americans come in, and the Americans actually are not letting the queer people free. So our main characters who are queer or communists or whatever, they have to still continue to hide who they are from the Americans who will lock them up. Such an emotional story, and it was emotionally told in the narration. It had a very beautiful writing style, which makes it all the more heartbreaking. And I thought the way that it flips back and forth between these timelines was really effective. I loved this book, and this is one of my favorite books of the year. It's up there, and it's going to be in my top 10, I'm sure. Then we have what books exceeded your expectations. This book I had been seeing around. Some people that I knew were reading it, but I had no idea what it was about, and something about like the cover did not interest me. And once I found out what it was actually about, I'm like, holy shit, no, I need to read this. Please give it to me. And I couldn't read it in time to read it with everybody else, and I was so sad. But it ended up being my very first book of the year, and I was really, really hoping it was going to set the tone for the year, and it has. And that is The Compound by Aisling Rahl. This is a science fiction book. It actually won the Goodreads Choice Awards for best science fiction despite having a really low average rating. And honestly, when it comes to speculative fiction, I don't trust low ratings because I will love a lot of them. And this is one of them. This is pitched as Black Mirror meets Love Island. And it's also like, if you love Leave the World Behind by Rumana Lom like I did, this is another one for you. Our main character signs up to be on this competition adaptation show called The Compound that is it's a romance dating show sort of thing where if you are not paired up with somebody at the end of the night, you get kicked out. And there's all these like tasks that you as a group have to fulfill, or you as an individual have to fulfill without anybody knowing it, to try to give you things in the compound, like actual tangible items. Like they come in there and there's no food, so they have to work together to get food. You can think of it as like something fun and entertaining and like a higher stakes reality show than real life. But it also talks about like human nature under pressure and hints to this outside world that something has gone wrong. I wanted it to be a 5-star so bad, but I didn't actually think it would, and I was so glad that it did. And another book that actually surprised me is Unruly by David Mitchell. This is a nonfiction that is about the kings and queens of England from the mythical days all the way up to Elizabeth I. And I really just enjoyed my time reading this the whole time. It felt like a podcast where somebody is very personably telling you about all these things and bringing some things into a modern context for you to better understand, but also like almost as a mnemonic of you being able to hold on to that information, and also bringing up like, what is the British monarchy? Like, what is it to England that this happened? I thought it was so fun. This is already something I was interested in. David Mitchell is a comedian that I already like, but I didn't expect this to go as well as it did. And I read this in a video and I just had a good time. What's a book that didn't meet expectations? Y'all heard me preaching the gospel of the subtle art of folding space for months. Every single anticipated release list, I had this on my list. And this was like the one author I hadn't read before, debut, whatever, that I was really, really excited about for this year. And I read it, and it is one of the worst books I've read in a long time. I accidentally wrote such a scathing review that I am the #1 review on Goodreads for this book. And I'm sorry to the author about that. Like, I did not write that with the intention of the author reading it, and I'm almost certain that almost every author has read the #1 review of their book, but like, I think this book is actually indiscernible. You cannot tell what is going on with this book. The plot of this book is pitched that the main character finds out that the thing that is making the universe fall apart is that her mother is in a coma. And it's like, oh, she's going to have to like let go of her mom so the universe can go back together. That's the pitch of the book. Except her mom's already dead by the time the book starts. And then it's just like trying to figure out who did it, but it's such a nonsense link of scenes. There is no physical description of so much stuff that's important. There's no logic told to you of why things are happening the way that they are. And I think this book is actually just bad. The themes of her abusive sister and her complicated mother, like none of those stories worked. Like they're not paid attention to enough. There's like one scene in this book that's redeemable. You don't feel anything for it because there's so much question marks of what the fuck am I reading, but in a bad way. And it has like a 3.25 on Goodreads. I'm not an unpopular opinion, obviously. So I write so many Goodreads reviews. I don't want people to think I'm such like a negative Nelly or whatever. I literally write a Goodreads review that is absolutely truthful for every single book that I read. And it's really saddening to me that one of the most scathing reviews that I've ever written is the one that I have that's #1 on Goodreads. I don't like that, but I will not take down the review. Another question that I added was, what's the most overrated book that you read this year? I've got 2. #1 is the most read book that I have read so far this year, and that's The Road by Cormac McCarthy. What do you mean this won the Pulitzer? This is about a man and his son who have experienced some sort of unknown apocalypse. This is something I do tend to like in books. Won't I like it in this one? No. The two of them are trying to cross the continent to get to somewhere warmer because it's so cold and there are so few resources around. And it is just bleak for bleakness sake. I do not think that this book is interesting. It is not written in an interesting way. It does not have characters. Like, there's no zombies in this book, right? But the characters are essentially zombies who are like just living from minute to minute trying to survive. And it's just nothing. If you want to read a story about a family in the apocalypse, you should read The Blue Book of Nebo by Man and Stephen Ross. It is so much better than this book and does not get any recognition. Another one I want to say, just to be controversial, Wild Dark Shore by Charlotte McConaughey is so overrated. I do not get Charlotte McConaughey at all. I don't think that this is a bad book. It was in the top 3 most mentioned books on BookTuber's best books of 2025. It's predictable. It doesn't really go anywhere. It's a kitchen sink drama. Like, is dramatic to be dramatic. What's that meme?
No one knows what it means, but it's provocative.
No, it's not. It
Gets the people going.
That's what this is. I really like Charlotte McConaughey taking an environmental angle to her books, but I just don't find her storylines compelling. Then I have a couple underrated books. For number of readers, I think way more people need to read the Magic of the Lost series. This is a fantasy series that is heavily and not subtly inspired by France's colonization of Northern Africa. And it is a trilogy. It's sapphic as fuck. It is so gay. It is so gay. I finished out the trilogy this year. I don't think that this series dipped in quality at all. It has so many interesting political conversations about systems of government and colonization, and nobody's talking about it. Please talk about it. One I would say is underrated for its average rating. I just read in my most recent vlog. That's The Dream Hotel by Leila Lalami. This is a speculative fiction, science fiction in which people are monitored for their behavior, and if you are at high enough risk to commit a crime according to the government, they will lock you away for remediation, but really they just have the right to not let you go, essentially. I think that this is such a fantastic speculative fiction. It is like a slice in time. It's not like going to be an epic adventure of like, let's go take down the system. It's more, let's see one person's experience in this system, and it worked really, really well for me. I'm so glad that I ended up going out and buying this. Who is a new to you author that you think could be a favorite? I had such a strong 5-star prediction feeling for this book. It ended up being like one of my favorite books of the year. Not quite a full 5-star, but up there. And her next book has also really interested me, and I bought it immediately. That is Kylie Lee Baker. I read Bat Eater and Other Names for Cora Zhang earlier this year. This is a horror that takes place during the pandemic in New York City, and our main character sees her sister killed in a hate crime motivated by the pandemic. She is called Bat Eater. She ends up getting a job cleaning up crime scenes, and there is a sudden rise in very violent deaths of East Asian people. I loved the flavor of horror that this was. I just loved the blend of like real life stuff, sort of folkloric stuff and bloody stuff, and it was just like all the time. I think that Kylie Lee Baker could be a favorite horror author of mine. I'm really excited for Japanese Gothic, which I already own. Next up, we have a bunch of superlative questions. The one that's usually in the survey is, what's the best character that you read this year? And I would say a standout character for me in books that I haven't already mentioned, I loved the male main character of the other finale that I really loved this year. One that I gave a 4.5 as well, and that is Business Casual by B.K. Borison. So these two characters are Nova and Charlie. Nova is trying to open up her tattoo parlor in town, and he is the brother of the girl who owns Love Light Farms. He is a financier in New York, and he comes down whenever he can. He loves this town, but he's not fully a part of it. And he is helping her financially set up her tattoo parlor. I loved Charlie's arc of him coming into this town and really wanting to be a part of the community and really never fully accepting that he is part of the community until people tell him outright, like, we want you here. Next up, what's the best writing style that you've read? And I'd say one of my favorites was Far From the Madding Crowd by Thomas Hardy. This is a Victorian classic that is about our main character, Bathsheba. She is a woman who came from little means, but then inherited her uncle's farm, and she does not want to give her power up to a man. And so she has been very selective about who she wants to get married to. And there are 3 suitors that are in her life, and it is surrounding sort of the principles that those 3 men represent, and how does that affect her. This is such a pastoral book. The writing style is gorgeous. Like, some people might think it's way too much, but I just loved how the descriptions of the scenery, the nature, the farm and everything brings emotion to the story and how our characters are feeling. I thought that this was gorgeously written, and I can't wait to read Tess of the Word I Can't Pronounce. I don't want to talk about only writing style itself, because I also want to talk about books that had fantastic editing and structure. I have 2 books to talk about. First of all, I'm reading The Hunger Games right now, and I do think like the higher level writing style of that series, like not the sentence structure itself, how we are introduced information, all the different little pieces of symbolism that are cut up throughout the book, and just everything about how the book is organized is so well done, and I was absolutely spoiled as a child reading that. But another one I'll talk about that's not a reread is Just Mercy by Bryan Stevenson. He is a lawyer who has argued in front of the Supreme Court multiple times, and this is a story about his career, as he has been someone who has fought for the rights of people on death row, people who have been wrongfully convicted, children who were given life imprisonment without parole, all those sorts of things, people who are in the justice system who do not have the money and resources behind them to be able to have justice. We have one central narrative, and then we have a lot of smaller examples that we get, or maybe we get updates on throughout. And this takes place over the course of decades. And I thought that the editing of this book and the way that it crafts its argument, which makes sense, he's a lawyer, I thought it was so well structured out, where I never felt like I was confused by bringing up multiple things, and I was able to follow the whole story and really get the sense of the sort of movement that Bryan Stevenson started has progressed throughout, and how civil rights don't always go forward. The things that I learned in that book are things that I am going to be able to take into other books, like The Dream Hotel. Then we have some emotional books. So are there any books that made you cry? So I've already mentioned No Matter What is the only book that has made me full tears leave my eyes. Multiple tear ups beforehand while driving, and then later full sobbing breakdown while playing Stardew Valley. I think The Lilac People made me tear up. I had a couple others, but another one that comes to mind that I haven't mentioned yet is Atmosphere by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is a historical fiction that is set in the 80s as women are finally being allowed into the astronaut candidate program. The synopsis of this book is vague about the actual plot of the book, but you get to know it pretty quickly. There is a relationship that she has to hide, and also there is a disaster that is going to change the entire course of her life, and we know that from the very beginning of the book. The way that the disaster itself was paced out, I thought was really good. I had seen so many people react to this book, and I had an idea of what I thought was going to happen, and it did end up changing my expectations because it surprised me. That made it all the more emotional. This is definitely an emotional one. I do think that this book is a little bit pared down. I wish it was longer and more detailed. I want to see more actual scenes and not just like skipping through time as this book does. What's a book that made you happy or laugh? Really, the only book that I've truly enjoyed this year that was not deeply emotional was Business Casual, which I've already talked about. That one is like a happy romance. The other happier books that I've read, either like they are also sad, or I didn't like them as much. So that's still my answer. What about a book that made you shocked? I'm going to say King of Ashes by S.A. Cosby. This is a book that follows a man whose family runs a crematory. There were rumors that his mother was killed by his father. His younger brother gets in trouble with some drug dealers, and he comes back into town. He's going to have to one up this gang, essentially. The intensity that this book just ratcheted up the whole time really surprised me. There's like one plot twist that I absolutely saw coming, and one that I did not see coming at all. Full gagged in the Harris Teeter parking lot. This is a book that I could have put for a bunch of other categories, but I decided I wanted to make a category that was a book most deserving of an adaptation, and that's The Reformatory by Tananarive Due. I think that this book is just the whole package. This is a horror book, but it's not horror scary. There are ghosts in here, and that's what makes it a horror, but the horror is the actual real life stuff happening. This is inspired by the Dozier School for Boys. It's set in 1950 in Florida, and we have a 12-year-old boy who kicks a white boy and gets sent to this reform school that is actually basically just a prison. It is him experiencing all of these terrible things there, while there are also ghosts and haunts of the past of this school that keep appearing to him, and his family and loved ones are trying to get him out of there at the same time. The writing style was so easy to get through despite this being a heavy book. It has a really good ramp up in plot and like a turn that kind of changes what sort of book this is without losing its way. I think that the characters are really strong. It's got such a strong like atmosphere and lore to it is just really strong, and I want this to be a movie so badly, or a miniseries, whatever. I'll take it. Now my last couple questions are going to be about books I have not read yet. We have, what is the most beautiful book you've acquired so far this year? And it is absolutely Cleopatra by Sarah El Arifi. This is what it looks like under the dust jacket, the end pages, and then like the art in the pages. This is just absolutely so gorgeous. Sarah El Arifi has written fantasy that I've really loved, and this is obviously a historical fiction that is talking about Cleopatra. I hope I love it because it's so gorgeous that I want to display it everywhere. What about some new releases that I need to get to? Some 2026 books that have already come out that I haven't read yet that I need to fix that. All three of these are books that I want to read, anticipating that they're going to be in the Goodreads Choice Awards for fantasy, but they also have caught my attention separately. So the number one of these, I have to read it. It's over here. It's The Poet Empress by Shen Tao. This is a absolute 5-star prediction. This is a dark fantasy. Our main character, her family is starving, and she ends up signing up to be a concubine of a violent prince in order to save herself and her family. And there is war coming. The magic has to do with poetry. Women are not allowed to participate in that. And I have heard nothing but absolutely fantastic things about this book. I also really want to read The Red Winter. This is, I believe, a standalone fantasy as well that is set around French Revolution, and it has to do with werewolves. And I did listen to the audiobook sample of this, and I am so intrigued by the storytelling of this. There's like demons, and it's got like a journal sort of vibe to the writing style and everything. I've heard people really hyping up the audiobook of this, so I'm going to listen to this at some point. And then the highest rated fantasy book that is not a sequel that has come out this year is This Kingdom Will Not Kill Me by Ilona Andrews, who's an author that I'd heard of but never been interested in before. And this is about a woman who gets sucked in to her favorite dark fantasy book, like grim dark, like everybody's dying left and right, and she wants to help out her favorite characters. And she finds out she actually can't die in the book. Unfortunately, this is the beginning of a series, so I probably won't prioritize this one as much. This isn't as much like something that I would expect I'd love, but the fact that it's getting such great reviews, I really want to check it out for myself. Then we have, are there any anticipated releases for the back half of the year that I really want to get to? And there is a number one for me, 100% for sure. It's Hollywood Ending by John Green. I'm a huge nerd fighter. I love all of John Green's writing. I've read everything that he has published by himself. I have listened to everything that he has said about this book, and I'm so deeply excited. Our two main characters are on a press junket for a movie that they are doing that is about the last years of Andy Warhol's life. Andy Warhol is someone who talked about fame extensively, and these two characters are experiencing fame in a way that they did not before. Every discussion that he has had about what went into this book has been so fascinating to me. And also early readers, and by early readers, I mean like his brother and like his family, because they are not actually doing arcs of this because there's so much of a risk of it leaking. They've said that it has more of a plot than his other books, and I'm really curious about this. This is his first ever adult fiction book. Literally couldn't be more hyped, and this cover, I'm so gagged. I love it. A couple more that I'm excited about. We have the third book in the Tainted Cup series, as well as the Spell Shop. These are series that I've been just looking forward to continue being caught up on. And the last question here is, what is the back half of your year of reading going to look like? So I'll just tell you, other than those books, what are some more that I'm hoping to get to by the end of the year? I'm definitely going to be reading The Incandescent by Emily Tesh for a vlog coming at the end of July. This is a dark academia sapphic fantasy that is about these teachers at a magical school. The magic has to do with demons. This is one that I had my eye on for the Goodreads Choice Awards last year, so I'm glad I'm finally getting around to it. I'm also going to be reading Out on a Limb by Hannah Bonham Young. For my letters challenge, I'll be reading it for my N and O month, whatever month that is. And this is about two people who meet at a party. They both have limb differences. They hit it off. They decide to sleep together. They end up pregnant, and they decide that they're going to raise the kid together as friends, but of course it's going to turn into something more. I love a friends to lovers situation as always, and my Bookstagram best friend Katie has been dying for me to read these books. This is one of her favorites, and I'm so excited to finally get to it, even though I'm sad because it's the first in a series. Get me out of here. I will never escape. And of course, I'm going to be finishing out my read of The Hunger Games in the back half of the year. So in July, I will be reading Mockingjay. In September, I will be reading The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes for the first time. And in maybe late October, early November, I will be reading Sunrise on the Reaping in preparation for the movie. And I will be making a video associated with all of those, comparing them to the movies as well, which I think has been super fun. So make sure you keep your eyes on that. And if you want to follow my little schedule and read along with me, go do that. It'll be fun. So those are all the questions I have today. Thank you so much for watching. Please let me know your answers to any of these questions. I most want to know what book exceeded your expectations. That's what I'd like to hear. If you don't have anything to say, what kind of emoji can you leave me? I don't know. Why not leave a rocket emoji in honor of atmosphere? But anyways, thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to find me anywhere on the internet, you can find me at the links in the description. And if you'd like to see more of my videos, you should hit subscribe. I'd love to have you around. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.